mean, coming to Malaysia in 2019 and 2020 under several projects on parliamentary reform. So together with David Elders, we supposed to have Kevin DeVos, but due to he is a parliamentary consultant, which is doing a comparative research on parliamentary legislation too. But due to unforeseen problems, so he cannot attend today event. Hopefully we can meet him in others time. Without further ado, I will start with my presentation to give some kind of background of parliamentary service legislations in Malaysia. Then it will continue with David Elder, and then it will be followed with the discussions and also question and answer session from participants. Okay. So this is presentation that I made at the Malaysian Bar. I mean, joined together with Bersama in one of the event. I mean, I remember it last year in 2022 with regards to the revival of Parliamentary Service Act in Malaysia. For your information, in 2020 we received a small grant to do a research on the revival of Parliamentary Service Act in Malaysia. So with five with five consultants coming from public university and also from former parliamentary researchers, we come out with the report on the revival of Parliamentary Service Act in Malaysia. So parliamentary service legislation is a backbone to establish a parliament institution that independent and autonomous in terms of powers to hire and fire in the administrations, and also power in terms of to get their own budget for the institution of parliament. In other Commonwealth countries, we have seen that in the Australian Parliament, they have Australian Parliamentary Service Act 1999. In India, they have Lok Sabha Secretariat 1965 Act or legislations. In Malaysia, previously we have Parliamentary Service Act 1963, but it had been repealed in 1992. In House of Commons UK, they have 1978 House of Commons administration 1978. So there are two legal instruments that are really important when we are talking about parliamentary service legislation in Malaysia: Federal Constitution itself and also the Parliamentary Service Act, which have been repealed. Under Article 65(4), which the source of law to be the source of Parliamentary Service Act in Malaysia. So there is the provision in the Article 65(4) and also Article 132, which define parliamentary service also is a part of the public service. So due to the constitutional amendment in 1992, automatically the amendment in 1992 not only on the Article 165 Clause 4, but also include in terms to give some additional seats to the House of Representatives. So the government using a strategy that they would like to do a constitutional amendment on to add on the numbers of the seat of the House of Representatives. But at the same time, they bringing the amendment to amend means to repeal Article 65 Clause 4, which is the source of law for Parliamentary Service Act. So this is institutional independence. In the current situations, we're supposed to have a separate, in the doctrine separation of power, executive, legislative, and judiciary. But at the same time, we're supposed to have a very, separation of power in terms of civil service, government servant. Means that executive need to be governed or need to be assisted by the public service, Commission of Public Service Department. Legislative supposed to have parliamentary service commissions or parliamentary service department, and judiciary they have like a judiciary committee and to assist in terms of the civil service. In the current situations, after 1992, when the constitutional amendment been made, after that what happened is that all the staff in the parliamentary institutions in the Parliament of Malaysia need to be approval and need to visit the document made by the Public Service or Parliamentary Service Commission. I give you an example, like me myself. I started working with Parliament as a research officer in 2012 until 2020. So when I started working with the Parliament as a research officer, I submit my document being interviewed by the human resource at the Parliament of Malaysia. Then all my documents and everything need to be vetted by the Public Service or Public Service Commissions. Need to make sure that you have that standardized and that you fulfill the requirements and everything. So at this current situation, that most of the legislative or parliamentary staff, they have to follow this procedure, which is all the document need to be by the public service commissions. Okay, this is some kind of historical background of Parliamentary Service Act in 1963. So 11 March is the first reading, and then 12 March second reading and third reading, approved at the House of Representatives. 20th November, 21st October 1992, the Parliamentary Service Act being implemented after 30 years being repealed, then officially being repealed through Act of Constitution Amendment 1992. And since 2011, 2005, there is some debate made by the members of the House in the House of Representatives requesting, asking the law being reinstated, but nothing happened. Then 2011, Tan Sri Wan Junaidi, during that time is Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, chaired the meeting in order to revive and to revisit, reinstate the Parliamentary Service Bill. Then after that, there was 2050 Tan Sri Pandika doing the same thing. There is a report in the House of Representatives, requires and then try to reinstate the Parliamentary Service Bill. Then there is 2019 until 2023. So we have seen several moves, several initiatives made by different government, even though there are changing government, especially after the Sheraton move in 2020. So why Parliamentary Service Act in Malaysia being repealed in 1992? So referring to Wan Junaidi Tunku Jaafar, several problems such as leadership, organizational structure was not complete, internal misconduct, and many more. In the WFD closed session in October 2018, there are discussion about the career advancement, job promotion, motivation, and job satisfaction combined with the government financial regulation. Some of the examples that I can give and I can share with you, if there is a situation where the parliamentary staff, being called for a disciplinary board, and then give, give some kind of punishment, then due to his close relationship with the Speaker of the House, because during that time the Speaker can, have a power discretionary board to, to receive the appeal from the parliamentary staff. So this is one of the reasons why the lacuna or the weakness of the Parliamentary Service Act during that time. So if the parliamentary staff during that time very close to the Speaker or the higher authority, so there is a good chances he or she being receive their appeal. So one of the example, the disagreement between the Speaker and also the Secretary of the House of Representatives, due to the provisions in the Article 65 mentions that if you want to remove the Secretary of the House, then the procedure is that is quite similar with the procedure how to remove High Court judge, tribunal in the through tribunal for the High Court judge. These provisions which have been enshrined in the Federal Constitution in the Article 65, where so because of this agreement, the Speaker cannot remove the Secretary of the Dewan. So what happened is that the Speaker during that time, Tun Zaid, have a meeting and then ask from the Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad in order to repeal 65(4) in order to solve the problem. So this is the Parliamentary Service Act 1963, which had been repealed in 1992. There were 8 sections. There is a bylaw, Parliamentary Service Regulation in 1983. In the Parliamentary Service Act 1963, it consists Parliamentary Service Advisory Committee consists of the Speaker Dewan Rakyat, Speaker Dewan Negara. There is one member of Dewan Negara selected by the Prime Minister. Members of Dewan Rakyat selected by the Prime Minister. And then member of Dewan Rakyat selected by the Speaker of Dewan Rakyat, Treasurer Representative, and then Director of Public Service Department or its representative. So these organizations in before 1992, there is a Speaker, Clerk of the House, and Representative and Clerk of the Senate. So during that time, Clerk of the House also being called as a Secretary of Parliament. So he is the one, the head of Parliament before 1992. Then Secretary of Dewan Negara becoming the Assistant or Deputy Secretary of the Parliament. So there is a Parliamentary Advice Committee under Section 5, which I'm referring to the previous slide, where the Speaker, both of the Speakers, member of Dewan Negara, member of Dewan Rakyat, selected by the Prime Minister and also Speakers. So under the Parliamentary Advice Committee, they being advised, the Speaker being advised by the Disciplinary Board, Promotion Board, and Appeal Boards. So other than that, they have administrative and finance functions, legislative and special functions. So this is the current administration. Currently, after 1992, in 2005, there is a head of parliamentary administrator. For the first time after the law being repealed, so parliament administration lead by the head of parliamentary administrator coming from the civil service, means that executive body, diplomatic officers, Jusabi. So all the house meeting affair is being managed by both of the Secretary of Dewan Negara and Dewan Rakyat. So in the current situation, both of them coming from the PTD officers. We are not so sure whether he's accountable to Parliament or accountable to the Cabinet Ministers. But so that is the current situation. So Parliamentary Secretariat is being executed by 11 departments or office, head by the Undersecretary. This is staff appointment. Currently, the total number of officers in Parliament, we have a conversation with YB Wong Chen yesterday, around 368, 39, yes, numbers. The permanent and contract service. So the appointing authority is a Public Service Commission. So the filling of position is based on the service scheme, which is subject to the head of service for each scheme. For your information, there are several service schemes in the Parliament of Malaysia. Like corporate com, they are coming from the information's government agency. So the head or the Director General of for information is the one. The cadre of the corporate com official is accountable to the Director General of Information. So they have about 10 to 11. Including Director General of Public Works, Director General of Mampu, where IT, Information Technology, they are accountable to the Director General of Mampu, the Accountant General, Director General of Information. Even for librarian, we have one librarian in the Parliament, in the parliamentary institution. He or she are also accountable to the Director General of the National Library. That's the reason why, so every 2-3 years, the librarian of Parliament will be changed. So it can be considered like they it's just a stepping stone for the librarian in the Parliament, librarian in the National Library coming to Parliament, to stepping stone to have another job or promotion to another positions. So that's one of the weakness. I read in my another paperwork the weakness of the parliamentary library, parliamentary library to get reform due to the changing of the librarian every 2 or 3 years. Okay. On top of that, there is a permanent lantikan tetap. permanent, and then dilantikan contractual basis, and also there is secondment. And in certain positions, there is a secondment made between the government agency to the parliament institution. So this is about the finance. Currently led by Chief Administrator. What happened is that in order to get budget for parliamentary institutions, all the officers, I mean, under secretary will discuss with the officer in each department, and then come out with their budget for department, and then all the budget department will pull together and present to the Chief Administrator, and then Chief Administrator of the Malaysian Parliament will present the budget to the treasurer officers. So the budget will be cut off by the officers coming from the treasurer. So then it will be presented by the ministers of finance during the annual budget in the Malaysian Parliament. So this is the proposal that when we propose our proposals, we touch a lot of things. There are several initiatives or ideas that we put in our research report. Among others, about Parliamentary Service Commission members. This is the old one, the Parliamentary Service Act 1963, which had been repealed. There is a one paper made in 2015 to improve the numbers or the numbers of the Parliamentary Advisory Committee. But this is our suggestion. So when we do our comparative study with House of Commons in UK, Australia, Canada, India, and New Zealand, so what our suggestion is that the 7 members come with the voting powers, including President of the Senate, Speaker of Dewan Rakyat, Leader of the House, Leader of Opposition, 1 member of the House of Senate, and 1 member of House of Representatives. Number 4, I mean the representative, 1 member of the House of Senate and 1 member of Representative need to be appointed through the motions. Means that the House need to know and then have powers to vote who is the representative from every house to be appointed as one of the members for Parliamentary Service Commission members. And then another one important aspect when we do our research is non-members of Parliament. In the House of Commons in UK, if there is academicians, civil society, I mean doing a lot of research and knows about the parliamentary affairs, he or she should be given an opportunity to be a representative for the public in the Parliamentary Service Commission. So by doing that, there is an engagement by the public inside the House or inside the Parliamentary Service Commissions. So 5 other members with non-voting powers, including Director General of Public Service, Secretary General of Treasurer, Chief Administrator of Parliament, and both of the Secretary of Dewan Negara and Secretary of Dewan Rakyat. So this is the scope of authority or the scope of function that's supposed to have by Parliamentary Service Commissions, including establishment of position to create how many numbers of positions that need to be created or are needed in the parliamentary service, and eligibility for appointment to the post created. So in terms of finance, determination of salary scales, allowance are the benefit determined based on the position formed in the parliamentary service, budget allocation, and financial institution of parliament. These are the head of parliamentary administrations in the Malaysian position. In the current situation, the head of parliamentary administrator or chief administrator of parliament does not have a source of law. So even in the constitution, even in the parliamentary service, there is no clear mentioning about the powers and about the chief administrator of parliament. What is the function, how to remove it and everything. So I'm not sure. The role is similar such as Director General of House of Commons UK. Maybe later on, David will explain about the Secretary of Department of Parliamentary Service, whether Chief Administrator of Parliament have similar powers, or whether that is equivalent to the position that you have as a Chief Executive. The open nomination is being made to Parliamentary Service Commission. Our suggestion is that open nomination, meaning that not only the public service officers coming from the civil service, means that the private sector, I mean, if we would like to have the best brain from the private sector too, if we can do the open nomination being made to the Parliamentary Service Commission, then the nomination being accepted for this position, they will be called for interview by the Parliamentary Service Commissions, meaning that the board of the speakers, the members of the Parliamentary Service Commission can interrogate and also interview the future of the Chief Administrators of Parliament. After being interviewed, the candidate will be reviewed by the Parliamentary Select Committee to oversight the candidates on maybe the Parliamentary Select Committee on Administration and Finance, or other Parliamentary Select Committee. So the position of the Chief Administrator of Parliament, Secretary of Dewan Negara, Secretary Dewan Rakyat are equivalent to assist the operations of Parliamentary Service Commission. So this is our suggestions. Parliamentary Service Commission need to establish under the legislative, and in order to assist the parliamentary institutions. The human resource, you have to understand there are several specific positions that does not have in other institution or in other civil service department. I can give you example like Parliamentary Budget Office, PBO, doing a research in order to assist and to balance with the annual budget made by the treasurer. So these are very specific. They are comprised from the accountant, economics, social researcher, legal background, lawyers and everything. So it only can be seen, and you can see the establishment of the Parliamentary Budget Office in the parliamentary institutions. Even in the other Commonwealth country and non-Commonwealth country, they have PBO, Parliamentary Budget Office. And Special Select Committee, you do not have that Special Select Committee in other government agency or civil service. Research and library service. So all these parliament professional, expert, trained staff give some kind of advisory to the, not only to the members of parliament, whether they are coming from government backbenchers, oppositions and independent. We are always giving a stress in terms of how independent the parliamentary service should, or being objective and non-partisan when they are doing their jobs and their works. So with the bill on Parliamentary Service Commissions, the Commission has the power to form position and appoint its own staff. Parliamentary Service Commission knows how many staff that we need in order to support Parliamentary Select Committee, in order to oversight the government. In the current situation, we've been told since yesterday around 15, but it's being shared by Dewan Negara and Dewan Rakyat, and then some of the staff not only covered one Parliamentary Select Committee, but also covered for another one or another two Parliamentary Select Committee. So, and then in terms of PBO, we does not have PBO in the Malaysian Parliament, but just imagine we have some kind of treasurer officers in the small team inside the parliament that can oversight the budget, annual budget, annual national budget of the government of the day. So, and then the research and library service, we have 15 right now. Assist the 222 and plus 70 members of the Senate. For sure, surely is does not enough human resource or researcher in order to support and give assistance to the members of parliament in doing their job as members of the house. So we also put in our report the need to have Parliamentary Select Committee on Administration and Finance. On top of that, I remember in the Australian Parliamentary Service Act 1999, there are another several Parliamentary Select Committee being established by the Australian Parliament, including Parliamentary Select Committee on Library of Parliament. They have the requirement where the Parliamentary Select Committee with regards of the library looks on the every year whether is it enough budget to to buy a books, on the look on the journals and everything. So every day, every year they come out with the report and also suggestion in order to improve the functions and the budget and the administration of the Library of Parliament in the Australia. So on top of that, they have a parliamentary select committee on administration and finance in other Commonwealth countries in order to oversight the functions of Parliamentary Service Commission and other matters. Okay, this is about the funding. Yeah, so okay. Other matters which have been discussed by the speaker when we did our report, we also engaged with the speaker from the state legislative assemblies, and they also come out with several suggestions, including the pension scheme system similar with the public service, parliamentary service value. We are talking about parliamentary officers need to be objective, non-partisan, transparency and good governance, member of parliament supporting staff being funded by parliamentary institution, and concurrent service with the state legislative, meaning that they can did their fellowship or seconded to other state legislative assemblies for career advancement and for other purposes. So that's all from reform. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation. So without further ado, I would like to allow David Allen to give his presentation.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. So I'm very pleased to be here to talk to you a little bit about the Australian Parliamentary Service Act. The first slide I've got, though, is just to prove my bona fides. That's yours truly, me, there in the Australian House of Representatives chamber in 2019, which was the year that I retired. A very, very robust debating chamber, the Australian House of Representatives, but the Malaysian House of Representatives and Senate are also very robust debating chambers. Interestingly, the then leader of the opposition, Mr Albanese, is now our Prime Minister. So just a bit of something to show that, So I'm just really going to talk fairly briefly because I think it's important we get to questions and the sorts of things that you're interested in. And this picks up a little bit from what Hardy has already said. What can a Parliamentary Service Act achieve? I think the first thing is it is a major structural reform that does strengthen the independence of Parliament. So that's pretty... Oh, okay, yep. So it's a major structural reform to strengthen the independence of Parliament. And we've already really heard quite a lot about how important that is in Malaysia. It gives the Parliament control of its own affairs and control of staffing, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. Potentially, I use the word potentially there, it gives Parliament more control over its budget and resourcing. Interestingly, in our situation, there's nothing specific in the Parliamentary Service Act itself which does give the Parliament the ability to determine its own budget, and in fact, in the Australian House of Representatives, the budget is not determined by the Parliament. It is a process of negotiation between the executive government and the Parliament. So now just turning to the major features of the Australian Parliamentary Service Act. So as Hardy mentioned, the Act dates back to 1999, so it was introduced and passed in 1999, and it establishes a non-partisan parliamentary service that is quite distinct from independent of the government civil service, and it is there dedicated to serving the Parliament. All those aspects are really key to what a Parliamentary Service Act is all about. non-partisan, independent of government, and there to serve the Parliament. It also provides the legal framework for the effective and fair employment, management and leadership of the parliamentary service. So it gives to the senior staff of the Parliament, and I was one of them, the Clerk of the House of Representatives, the ability to employ, manage and lead the staff that I was responsible for. And in that respect I had full autonomy and capability to be able to do that. And the legal basis for that was in the Parliamentary Service Act. It also defines the powers and responsibilities of the presiding officers, the secretaries of the departments, including the two clerks of the two houses, and a Parliamentary Service Commission. And I probably won't say too much about that. It's not really a role related to a Parliamentary Service Commission in the way that Hardy spoke about it in his presentation. And very importantly as well, it establishes the rights and obligations of the Parliamentary Service employees. So this is not just about the senior people in the organisation, it is about what are the obligations, responsibilities and rights of every employee in the Parliamentary Service. So just in terms of staffing, this is one of the key areas of autonomy that is delivered by a Parliamentary Service Act. In the case of the Australian Parliamentary Service Act, the heads of all the parliamentary departments, the secretaries as they're called in the Malaysian situation, are appointed by the presiding officers. So as the Secretary of the Australian House of Representatives, when I was appointed in 2014, I was appointed by the then Speaker of the House. She had to consult with other members and also conducted a selection process to determine my appointment. And I'll talk a little bit more about the situation of the secretaries in a minute, because I think it is a very, very important issue. Once the head has been selected, then that person is the employing agent for all the staff in the department. So as the Clerk of the House of Representatives, it was my responsibility to sign off on all the engagements and promotions to my department. I had the final say, the final responsibility for determining that. There was no reference, and Hardy has made reference to the appointment of staff currently to the Malaysian Parliament. There is a civil service process that needs to be gone through. There's no civil service process involved in the Australian House of Representatives. It's entirely a matter for the head of the agency. So very importantly, and this is actually is defined in the Act, the employment and promotion of staff must be by open, fair, merit-based and competitive processes. So for example, if we have a vacancy in the organisation, it would be advertised nationally, and anyone would be open to be able to apply to fill that vacancy, including people from our current public service, our current civil service. Any position in the parliamentary service is also open to them. One of the very, very important provisions of our Act was that it provides for mobility between the parliamentary service and the civil service. So a very, very important provision, because one of the concerns that our staff had was that if they form a separate parliamentary service, they may not have the opportunity for continued possibility of advancement within the civil service. So that ability to be able to interchange between the two services is very, very important. In the case of my own organisation, you know, probably 10 or more people each year would leave the parliamentary service to join the public service, and we would probably recruit 10 or so people from the public service into the parliamentary service. Again, a very, very important aspect of being able to effectively staff the parliamentary service. And there were some transitional sort of arrangements as we moved from, you know, the old arrangements in 1999 to the new. There clearly needed to be a number of transitional provisions, and something like that will definitely need to be thought about in terms of the Parliamentary Service Act here in Malaysia. I probably won't really go over this one. This one probably is more for a discussion tomorrow with the staff, but again, it's just demonstrating that autonomy and so on of each of these agencies. So each of the departments had its own processes for performance management and discipline of their staff. I really wanted to emphasise the independence of the secretaries. I think this is just very, very important. That ability to provide independent advice. The sound seems to have elevated. Can people? Well, these ones working now? Anyhow, I'll keep going. So the ability for me, when I was the Clerk of the House of Representatives, to be able to provide fearless advice to the Speaker, to the House and to MPs was absolutely critical. If there was any thought at all that my views could be influenced by outside forces and that I wasn't in a position to provide completely impartial, independent advice, then it would have been a matter of major concern. So there are particular provisions in the Parliamentary Service Act that actually protect the ability of the secretaries of the houses to be able to provide that independent advice. Firstly, the secretary of the houses are appointed by the presiding officer, as I've already mentioned, and they're appointed for a 10-year non-renewable term. So that's an interesting provision, and I personally didn't last my 10 years. 5.5 years were about enough for me, but I theoretically had 10 years. The interesting thing about a non-renewable term is that, and I felt this very strongly when I was in the role, that you didn't feel the need to be, to kowtow to anybody, because you didn't need to butter anybody up or anything like that, because you were not going to be renewed again. You're only going to get one shot at this, and you were in a position that was fairly untouchable, I thought, and that was an enormous value to me. And the only way you can be removed, and Hardy was talking about the removal of a previous Secretary of the Malaysian House of Representatives, is by a vote of the House. And there are only two grounds for removal. One is incapacity, that is, you become desperately ill or something like that, or misbehaviour. Now, misbehaviour is a very general term, but obviously involves doing something that was improper. The Act actually specifies that the persons who take up those roles must have a very strong knowledge of parliamentary practice and procedure. So this really prevents anybody just being dropped in from the ordinary civil service into those roles, because they do need to demonstrate their knowledge of parliamentary practice and procedure. And another very, very important provision in the Act is that your presiding officer can't direct you about any advice that you give on procedures of the House. So although the Speaker may have had particular views about matters that were before the House, it was entirely independently available to me to provide the advice that I wished to provide. I won't probably touch on pensions. I think that's probably something more for tomorrow's presentation. And just probably almost the final thing is the financing of the Parliament. So in Australia, the Parliament has its own act to fund the Parliament. So there's a Parliamentary Appropriations Act, which is introduced every year along with the ordinary Appropriations Act for public service agencies. So an entirely separate act that's there to fund the Parliament, and it funds each of the parliamentary departments separately. So each of the parliamentary departments has, if you like, a line in that budget bill which says this is the amount of money you're going to get for the next year, whatever that amount of money is. So each of the 5 parliamentary departments, or 4 parliamentary departments, have their own provision for their budget. But the budget isn't determined by the Parliament. The budget is determined in negotiation between the Parliament and the government, usually the Department of Finance or the Minister of Finance, and it's not a matter for us saying to the government, we want this amount of money, you must give it to us. We say we think we need this amount of money, and then there's a negotiation about where that might end up. I think it's very, very important probably to understand that I think it's probably difficult and perhaps unreasonable to expect any Parliament to be in a position just to say to government, this is the amount of money we want and you'll give it to us. I think inevitably there's going to be negotiations and discussions about what budget should be. But Hardy sort of touched on this. Each of the houses has a specific committee which oversights the budget for the parliamentary departments, and we can use that committee to apply some political pressure on the government if we feel that the government has not provided the sort of funding we think we need for our services. And that committee actually reports each year to the Parliament on the budget, or the adequacy of the budget that's been provided to the organisation. I think it's probably, I'll just touch on this very briefly, you know, once money's been allocated to the organisation, once we've got our single line of appropriation, there is full autonomy in the department to determine how those funds are spent. So if I wanted to have another 10 staff on parliamentary committees, so long as I could afford it within the budget, I could employ another 10 staff on parliamentary committees. If instead of 10 staff on parliamentary committees we wanted to host the CPA conference, then funds could be allocated to host the CPA conference. So complete autonomy to spend that money, which was just a single line. It was said, would say $30 million for the Department of the House of Representatives for the next year, and it was entirely within the hands of the organisation as to how that money was spent. The only constraint on the spending is that there are general guidelines for all agencies of the Commonwealth of Australia, both public sector organisations as well as the parliamentary service, to ensure the proper process and probity, particularly, for example, in something like procurement. So you can understand those needs for proper processes and probity and so on in the acquiring of goods and services and people. And again, very, very importantly, and I'm not sure whether this happens in Malaysia, but you know, the head of the agency reports annually to Parliament and accounts for the spending that's been made and the performance of the organisation over the previous 12 months. So that includes, you know, tabling our financial statements. So there's complete openness and transparency and accountability for the public money which we have to spend. Just sort of touch briefly on the parliamentary service versus the public service. So as I mentioned earlier, obviously the PSA Act created an independent parliamentary service. Very, very importantly, one of the things that is in the Act is a statement of values, and I think the statement of values is a very important aspect of the Act and something that, you know, should be thought about in the Malaysian situation, because the parliamentary service is different from the public service. It does have different values, it has different priorities, and most importantly, the Parliamentary Service Act provides for staff to be impartial, non-partisan, and provide advice that is frank, honest and timely. So that is specifically in the Act, and that is something that we would spend a lot of time with our staff working through as to what that meant in terms of the services that they were expected to provide. But I should say that even though the two services were different, we did maintain a very healthy working relationship with our colleagues in the civil sector, civil service organisations, and vice versa. I'd have to say they had an appropriate respect for the Parliament. They understood the independence of the Parliament, and there was a mutual understanding and respect for the respective roles. I won't touch on the Parliamentary Service Commissioner because it's a bit sort of obscure. So with that, I think we can probably move to questions and discussion. How are we going to run this, Hardy?
Thank you, David. Thank you, David, for your presentations. Now I open to the floor for any questions or any point of view that you would like to share with us, or you have specific question to David, that would be better. Yeah. Anyone? Yes, please.
Hello, morning. I suppose I am directing this question to David. I'm just curious whether in history, whether Australia has ever experienced a situation where, you know, the government of the day attempts to kind of influence Parliament in any way via parliamentary services, or, you know, via the legislation with regards to parliamentary services. Thanks.
It's a very good question. I think it'd be fair to say that governments are probably always trying to influence influence whatever they can possibly get around to influencing, including the parliamentary service. There would certainly be plenty of examples where government has put pressure on to get the Parliament to do something that they wanted to do, and that could be exercised through the presiding officers, or it could be exercised through the secretaries of the houses. Certainly, at times, I would have had senior public servants contacting me to try and influence a particular outcome on something. That wouldn't be unusual. So, you know, what do you do about that? Again, I think I pointed to the fact that we did have these respectful relationships with civil service organisations and a mutual respect and understanding of our respective roles. So sometimes it was a matter of telling them to go jump in the lake. But other times it would be a discussion and negotiation, and perhaps getting to some agreement about mutual sort of acceptable outcomes. But I think very importantly in that situation, you see, I wouldn't have felt as though I needed to kowtow to those senior civil servants, because they had really no potential ultimately to influence me, or, you know, what I would do or any advice I would give. I certainly would always listen to what other people had to say. I think the concern potentially in Malaysia, as it is at the moment, you know, if those appointments are from the civil service and they're made without reference to the Parliament or the presiding officers, and I believe that has happened, then, you know, you're in a very dangerous situation, because, you know, what is that person thinking? They're thinking, I need to keep, you know, on the good books with the government, because otherwise I might be out of a job, to put it very crudely. So, you know, I think that's a real concern, and, you know, a Parliamentary Service Act, if nothing else, is going to give that degree of autonomy and independence to those most senior staff in the organisation. Does that answer the question? Or yep. In terms of the Parliamentary Service Act itself, there's been no efforts to amend that Act, other than amendments that are perfectly agreeable to everyone. So certainly there's been no attempt no, definitely no attempt to repeal it. I mean, in Australia, prior to Australia's been a federation since 1901, so obviously we had a parliamentary staff for a long time before we had a Parliamentary Service Act. So staff were employed under the Public Service Act, but there were special provisions in the Act that applied to staff employed by the Parliament. So we always had a degree of autonomy anyway, even under the old Public Service Act. So for us, the change to a Parliamentary Service Act wasn't a huge revolution because we already had considerable independence, but it certainly strengthened this concept of having a single parliamentary service to develop the professionalism and capacity of staff as parliamentary officers, and it was a cultural, symbolic sort of shift, I think, for us. You can ask me about other things in terms of the Australian Parliament as well, if you'd like. I'm happy to take any questions.
It's okay. Okay. Thank you, sir. My name is Nathan, and it's an honour to have you here. I just have two questions. I have two questions. The first is your primary role as Clerk of the House of Representatives as to what you do, essentially. And the second... What is the role, yeah, what is the role and what you essentially do. Yeah. And the second question is, throughout your tenure as Clerk of the House of Representatives, what was the most challenging thing that you had? Yeah, thank you.
First question, really there's two aspects to the role. It's really a role with two sort of broad responsibilities. The first one was as the primary advisor to the Speaker, to the House, to members about parliamentary practice and procedure. So that would occupy, a lot of my time, providing advice to members, providing advice to the Speaker, providing advice to the House, sitting in the House during parliamentary sittings and providing advice. So that advisory role is, the key role on one side. The other was I was the CEO of, a department of 180 staff and a budget of $30-odd million. So the other aspect of my job was just being a CEO like any other CEO of an organisation, managing staff, managing resources, ensuring there was appropriate accountability to the Speaker and the House for the spending of those resources. So really those are the two sort of broad sort of roles that I had. The most challenging thing was always in the chamber, and that was always the most challenging situations that one would face because you were being torn between various political forces, and each of them wanted to win, and sometimes the advice that you gave could help one of them win rather than the other, and that was always very, very difficult because you certainly hoped that members didn't take it personally, that you're providing advice that wasn't going to be very helpful to them, but that is the importance of that ability to be able to feel that you can provide fearless and frank advice, because if you felt that you couldn't, then you would have a problem, you would have a credibility problem. So even though I would provide advice that people wouldn't like, I still had credibility. I had credibility, and they respected the impartial way that I went about doing the job.
Hi David, it's an honor to be here actually to hear your lecture today. Can I ask you a question, because the Parliamentary Service Act been implemented in Australia in 1999. Then I do some research and I want to know what actually happening, how the governments and the parliamentary administration working on the Parliamentary Service Act. Because during that time, I just remember Neil Andrews putting up the reforms, and I think they have lots of political challenge as well to convince the governments, to convince the executive, to convince the parliamentary staff the values of parliamentary service. So how that process, and what's the tension of political reform that been faced by Neil Andrews?
Well, I think I think there was a recognition that, as I said, even though we really had our own independence in many respects under the Public Service Act, because we were employed under very particular provisions that didn't apply to anybody else and did give us quite a lot of autonomy, I think Neil Andrews recognised the need for this the concept of developing a parliamentary service, as a group of people who are dedicated entirely to providing services to the Parliament. So I think that's the thing that drove him to think about those sorts of changes. And I think there was probably pushback about it. Certainly one of the concerns that the staff had, and I gather that this might be a concern here as well, was the issue of their career prospects, because the parliamentary service, I think we have about 1,500 staff across the parliamentary service in total, whereas our public service has 60-odd thousand staff. So you do have better probably career prospects in the broader public service. That was why that provision, and I think that provision to provide mobility was in fact a late inclusion in the bill, and that was one of the key things to ensure that staff were happy enough with the changes. My recollection of issues from the government, I don't know that the government had a major sort of problem with it. I think it was probably already a recognition that the Parliament did operate pretty independently and autonomously, and this was just another way of recognising that. So I don't think there were major sorts of issues at the time. Interestingly, I sort of, in the context of this, I had a look back at the annual report of my department immediately after the Act had been passed, and in a report of about 100 pages there were about 2 paragraphs of reference to the Parliamentary Service Act. So I conclude from that it was just like a little blip and then we moved on. So that's sort of interesting, and perhaps that's something that staff of the parliamentary organisation can feel some comfort about. People are rightly concerned about change. Inevitably people are concerned about change, but the fact of the matter is you move through it and you get through it, and the world goes on the other side.
Hi, I'm Alyssa from Think Tank here. My question is on the Parliamentary Budget Office, and whether it's staffed like entirely or mostly from Treasury, people recruited from Treasury, or is there a mix, and what are the considerations there? Because from the Treasury you would expect, okay, then everyone has very in-depth information about the budget cycle and they're able to give that advice and good analysis to the parliamentarians. At the same time, would they be too entrenched in the system and not giving a good independent analysis, right? So what are those considerations, and what types of advice and research is given to the parliamentarians from there?
Yes, well, the Parliamentary Budget Office was established, I'm just trying to think when, 2014, 2015, something like that, or maybe a little bit earlier than that, yeah. It does mainly draw its staff from Treasury or Finance, and that's because it does require people with very specialised skills and knowledge, and those are the organisations that have that sort of skill and knowledge. You probably could describe them as econocrats or pointy heads or something like that, but they were funny beasts, people in the Parliamentary Budget Office. We have that challenge all the time of recruiting from civil service organisations. As I've mentioned, the major source of recruitment for, say, my own organisation was from the civil service, particularly graduates who might have done 2 or 3 years in the civil service and were looking for something else to do. The parliamentary service was really very attractive. The challenge you immediately have when you're getting people from the civil service is how do you enculturate them into an organisation that's there to provide independent services to the Parliament. So I know the Parliamentary Budget Office has that issue of, as we all do, making sure that our staff do understand the difference between being in the parliamentary service and being in the civil service. The civil service is there quite appropriately to support and assist the government of the day. That's their job. We're not there to assist the government of the day. We're there to assist the Parliament, which can be comprised of government, opposition, independent members, etc. So it was a matter of, it is a matter of inculcating those sorts of values, and that's why I think the Parliamentary Service values are so important to be in something like a Parliamentary Service Act, to appreciate the difference in the nature of that service. What sort of services does the Parliamentary Budget Office provide? It provides, provides services to individual members. So, for example, say a member or one of the political parties have an idea about, I don't know, raising the pension or something like that, or raising, introducing a new tax. The Parliamentary Budget Office will be able to cost for them what that measure will cost, or if it's a revenue-raising measure, how much revenue it's likely to raise. And they have very, very good relationships with Department of Finance and the Treasury to assist them in providing very accurate costings to parliamentarians. In fact, probably their costings might be better than Finance's and Treasury's. I'm not sure, but they're very good. They do also develop more general sort of advice and papers, which are available to all members and senators, but most of their work is providing support to individual members with that sort of request for advice about something to do with the budget. They undertake an analysis of the government's budget every year. That's one of the general things that's provided to all members and senators. It was an enormously valuable additional service that was provided to members and senators with the establishment of the Parliamentary Budget Office. So it's now one of the 4 sort of separate parliamentary departments in the parliamentary service. Obviously, all of you do very, very good research.
Yep. Hi, good morning, Mr. David. I want to follow up with the questions about the development of parliamentary service and autonomies, as probably we are informed that the 1999 bill enactment is probably a minor one. It's not a major reforms or stepstone, because the autonomy has established since long times ago. But probably we are more interested to know in the history times, when the parliament autonomy is not that strong, what is the catalyst and what is the progress that turns the government to accede, to acknowledge that we need a parliament autonomy, and thus we shift the power? Because for like Malaysia's, probably pre-independence, or at the period we crossed through the independence, most of the parliament staff are the share staff or even the employee of the government, and they just subcontract to parliament when parliament have sittings. And probably now better we have a department for parliament, but most of the state legislatures in Malaysia, the staff are probably use they use the staff from the state government's officers, which usually they will become the state secretary officers during ordinary time, probably 3-4 days for state legislative assembly sitting, they will sit in the parliament, that's all. So why is the progress that changed this situation to a more autonomy? And second, probably more interesting to know about what's the influence of state legislatures in Australia? Whether they are more diverse than Australian parliaments, or in some sense, is it the federal parliament lead the development, or the state parliament start the development first? Yeah, these 2 aspects. Thank you, Mr. David.
Okay, first question. Now remind me again, the first question was, yes. Listen, from the start, 1901, the Parliament had its own staff. It had its own staffing complement. They were quite small. I think the Department of the House of Representatives had something like 5 staff, whereas there's now 180. So things started off very small, but the staff were recruited specifically to support the Parliament, and they were dedicated to supporting the Parliament. And I think very importantly, we've got colleagues from Westminster here, you know, from the mother parliament. Certainly Australia very much inherited that whole tradition of the Westminster United Kingdom Parliament. It had already been reflected in our state legislatures, which predated the federal Parliament. And so, you know, it wasn't a matter of convincing people about the independence and autonomy of Parliament. That started in 1901. And it started because there was a very strong understanding of where all this came from. And if you read the debates about we have a written constitution like Malaysia, so the constitution dates back to 1901. So the debates to give rise to that constitution recognised the independence and autonomy of Parliament. So really that started from day one for us. It wasn't a matter of convincing people about the need to do that. The second question, just remind me quickly, the states, the relationship between the... So, you know, like Malaysia, we're a federation. So in 1901 we created the federation. So our states have an independent, autonomous, constitutional role. You know, they haven't given up their direct constitutional responsibilities. The federal government, under our 1901 constitution, has been given certain responsibilities, foreign affairs, defence, etc., etc. And so the federal government and the federal parliament exercise their area of responsibilities and the states exercise theirs. There is, certainly at the parliamentary staff level, there's often quite a lot of interchange between the state legislatures and the federal legislature. So for example, people will be recruited from one or other into those institutions, because again, you know, being in the parliamentary service is quite different from being in a civil service, and so people naturally can move fairly freely between those sorts of services. Probably the federal parliament would most certainly say that it was the boss over the state parliaments, but I'm not sure whether the state parliaments would always agree. And the state parliaments, state governments have very important continuing responsibilities. For example, health and education are the responsibilities of the states, they're not the responsibility of the Commonwealth. Did that answer your question? You don't look entirely happy, but...
Hi, Mr. David. I'm Salami from Bersama. I'm just wondering, in terms of budgeting, what is exact process or procedure for this Parliamentary Service Commission in proposing or in tabling the budget, or how to use the consolidated fund, national consolidated fund? Is there any still negotiation or consultation with the Ministry of Finance, or completely independent from that process, or how exactly the process is? Thank you.
As I mentioned, it is a sort of collaborative negotiation process. So essentially the way it works is an agency like, I'll use the Department of the House of Representatives where I was. We will get the same money we had the previous year, plus an inflation component, an inflation lift, and that pretty much is a guaranteed amount that we would be getting for the next financial year. So basically the same money plus an inflationary component. If we wanted more money than that, so say for example the House established another 2 committees, and we needed to staff and resource those 2 committees, we put a proposal, usually through the Speaker, to the Minister for Finance to get more money to enable us to fund those 2 committees. And then it's a negotiation, a discussion about whether we're going to get those additional funds. Similarly, for example, if we wanted to host the CPA conference, that's going to cost a lot of money. We can go to the government and say we need extra money that financial year to enable us to fund that. And then there will be discussion and negotiation about whether we get that money or not. Ultimately, you know, the parliamentary bill that gives us our money is tabled by the Minister for Finance. So ultimately the Minister for Finance, you know, determines what's going to be in that bill. That's why I said we don't have autonomous funding in the Australian Parliament. And I think it's perhaps a bit unrealistic to expect that, you know, a government is going to say to the Parliament, you tell us how much money you want and we'll give it to you. I just don't see that happening. But there are ways in which you can influence those sorts of outcomes through negotiation and discussion. I also mentioned we have a House of Representatives committee that oversights our budget. It reports to the Parliament each year when our budget is presented and will make comment about whether it considers the budget is adequate to fund the needs of the department, and that report is presented to Parliament and it's available publicly. So that's one way of bringing some pressure to bear and influence on government to sort of, and it's a committee made up of members from all the political parties that provides that sort of advice to the government. So that's sort of the way it works. It's quite a complicated process, but you know, it actually works reasonably well, and mostly if we wanted more money for things, we would find we would get it from the government. But we were guaranteed what I'd call a base level of funding. So we were always guaranteed we would have a base level to fund our core services to members, the Parliament and committees. So that was reassuring.
Hi David, thanks for your presentation. I'm Ryan, I'm from YB Wong Chen's office. So we were supposed to meet yesterday, but I was out with a cold, unfortunately. I've got two questions for you.
Yep.
So the first one is on, well, it's about MPs. So in the Malaysian context, members of Parliament do not get research officers. They have to hire their own officers or do their own research independently. So I was wondering, in the Australian context, when it comes to the Parliamentary Services Act, are there avenues for MPs to approach, let's say, research staffers to get more informed on issues, or are they allocated research staffing by under the Parliamentary Services Act? And my second question is, when bills are introduced in the House, does Parliament provide its own independent commentary on or briefs on the issues at hand, so that elected representatives like MPs or senators are able to make a more informed but impartial decision on the issues that are being tabled? Thank you. So
firstly, the staffing of members. So each member is, and this isn't under the Parliamentary Service Act, and it isn't actually a responsibility of the Parliament. It's actually an executive department that does this. But each member is entitled to 5 staff, whether they be research or electoral support staff. So that's for their elected office as well as their needs at Parliament House. So 5 staff is guaranteed to each member, each backbench member. If you're a more senior member, a shadow minister or a minister, you're likely to have a much larger sort of staffing component. So the Prime Minister might have 50 or 60 staff. I don't know how many he has, but so that's sort of the way it works. So each member guaranteed at least 5, and then other more senior members or with wider responsibilities would have larger numbers. The member is the employer of those staff, so the member makes the decisions about who those staff will be, but they're sort of, for the purposes of employing them, they're employed under an Act of Parliament called the Members of Parliament Staff Act, MOPS Act. And certainly if you want to have a look at the MOPS Act, you'll see the details of the employment arrangements. Second question. Our parliamentary library provides a brief on every bill that is presented to the House. It's called a Bills Digest, and it provides a summary of the contents of the bill, any sort of commentary that's around. And if you listen to speeches in the House on bills, you'll find quite a lot of content has come from Bill's Digest that the Parliamentary Library has produced. So members certainly use it. I think they do. It does keep them well informed. The only problem is that legislation tends to pass in the House fairly rapidly, and sometimes the digests are sort of, the bills pass before the digest is produced, or pass the House of Representatives anyway, before the digest is produced. But yeah, every bill will have a brief available to all members and senators.
Thank you.
Any question? Actually, I have two questions.
Oh,
David,
you can't ask questions.
first, with regards of the governance element in the Parliamentary Service Act, you did mention about the establishment of the Parliamentary Select Committee on Administrations and Finance to oversight the use of money or on the financials, parliamentary financials. So other than that, there is a annual report. I know the House of Commons in UK also have annual reports. In Australia also you publish annual report every year with regards of the administrations and how the money being used for the public to look on. Because of this, we are talking about the taxpayer money being used. So other than that, if you have any idea what else, because you did mention about the speaker have a power to appoint the secretary of every department. So how do you make sure that the speaker, whether the appointment, being proposed by the committee, one of the committee, in order to appoint, to assist the speaker to appoint the head of each department. So can you elaborate more on that?
Yes, so in relation firstly to the two secretaries of the houses, they are appointed independently by the respective presiding officer. So the Speaker of the House for the Clerk of the House, and the President of the Senate for the Clerk of the Senate. It's entirely in their hands as to what process they undertake to make that appointment. The only provisions are, as I mentioned, the person's required to have a considerable knowledge of parliamentary practice and procedure, and the presiding officer is required to consult members of the relevant house about the appointment. And I know from my own appointment how that works. The Speaker calls the Prime Minister and calls the Leader of the Opposition and says, I'm about to appoint such and such. Do you have a problem? Fortunately, they didn't have a problem with me, so I managed to get through that process. So that's the sort of, and I think she actually contacted the independent members as well to ask them. So that was the process. In terms of the heads of the other parliamentary departments, which are joint departments, so Parliamentary Budget Office, the Department of Parliamentary Services, those appointments are made jointly by both presiding officers. In the case of the head of Parliamentary Services, again, it's a matter for the presiding officers what process they undertake to recruit that person. In the case of the Parliamentary Budget Office, and you mentioned the Parliamentary Librarian, a parliamentary committee is involved in the process of those selections, and that's specifically provided for in the Parliamentary Service Act. So certainly a committee gets involved in the selection of those two appointments. But ultimately the presiding officers make the appointment.
Another question is about the I'm not so sure whether in Australian Parliament you have a parliamentary drafting department that can assist members of Parliament, especially the oppositions and independent, when they would like to draft the private members' bill. So how is the process, how the parliamentary, officers in the parliamentary service in the Australian Parliament assist the members of the House in order to prepare private members' bill?
Well, in the good old days, we used to have a go ourselves as drafting, but I worked out that drafting bills is a very, very specialised skill. And I felt very, very nervous every time I was trying to draft a bill or draft amendments for members. So what we did was we spoke to our the government drafter, the Office of Parliamentary Counsel, and they provide us on secondment with a person to do private members drafting, and I know the Senate has the same arrangement. So it meant that we had a person with the necessary skills to provide that service to members, and so that person provides drafting services for bills and amendments to private members, to any member who makes a request. So as a result, the number of private members' bills, you know, we probably have 40 or 50 private members' bills a year now, or we probably used to have 2 or 3. So it's made a dramatic difference, and a very, very important service, I think. But that was the way of doing it, to get the expert in from outside, and they just come on secondment. They spend a year or something like that.
Hello, my name is Arifin from IDE. Just quick question, what is your opinion on if we can organize a specific course or a diploma level or degree level for the, such as, because I think from your presentation and then from Hadi presentation, for future I think it indeed requires specific skills, not only just using the so-called traditional way, but I think the researcher in the parliament and the setup need to invest more towards data analytics, more towards it. So what is your opinion if you can have a professional course or post-grad, post-diploma, on which this kind of a career will not only for those who have a legal background, but it can be extend toward the social science and social, even though that those who are from science stream, because you need to know further in terms of the policy. So what kind of your opinion on that, and then how can we such module, if from your opinion, maybe how we can craft it? Thank you.
Yep, a good sort of question. So we had an arrangement with one of our universities to conduct a parliamentary, I forget exactly what it was called, parliamentary law and practice course for parliamentary staff. And so I think every 6 months there would be an intake of staff from the federal parliament, but also the state parliaments, to do that course, which was specifically designed to give people, particularly those without a law background, some degree of grounding in key issues about parliamentary law and practice. So, the expectation probably was that, that many of our more junior staff would do that course, and that would provide them with that sort of background. We also had a very extensive development program ourselves, which we ran ourselves in-house using our own staff, which was designed to lift the skills and capabilities of staff in those sorts of areas, making them familiar with practice and procedure. I mean, a good example was at the end of each sitting week we would have what we called a debrief. So the senior staff of the department would attend the debrief. Anybody from the department could attend, and they would be run through the sorts of events and activities that had happened in the House during the week from a procedural perspective. So that was a great way of informing staff about, the sort of nuts and bolts of what sort of happens in the House and how to get across that. In terms of other sorts of areas of knowledge, the major source of our recruitment, for example, to our committee office is graduates, who've got skills in, science or education or whatever. So that's our, if we want people with those sorts of skills, our main source of recruitment would be probably from graduates in the civil service who are in those civil service, relevant sort of civil service departments.
Mr. David, good morning, and good morning to all. Thank you for your presentation and your sharing of knowledge, and thank you for Mr. Hadi and
Nobody's asking him any questions. No one's asking him any questions.
Okay, I think
must have a
I have
question
a few interrelated questions. First of all, correct me if I'm wrong from your presentation just now. It's quite, I think, immunity or security of tenure for the post secretary post.
Yeah.
But still, in case of disciplinary, it can be removed or dismissed through the motion of the House.
Yeah.
Have you or your colleagues have ever experienced the
Yep.
case of motions of dismissal and removal
Yep.
of the House in Australia? My
Okay.
first question.
Yep.
And the next is, you also mentioned that the appointment of, I think, for secretary post is a 10-year non-renewable term.
Yep.
Can you elaborate the meaning of 10-year non-renewable term? Is it as compulsory, or at the end of the term can be renewable, or the new term?
Yep.
And I think it also related to is any what we can say, there is an in-house training system in Australia for the succession plan for the post of secretary or the head of department of the parliamentary service department, or is there any scout or such committee has been created under parliamentary service? And also,
I think I better start, otherwise I'll forget what you started with.
The most important thing is that is there any the post-service benefit to the staff? Normally we give them pensions,
right,
or whatsoever. I think.
Okay, so yeah, might have to remind me as I go through. So first was there, since 1999 there has not been a motion in the House for dismissal of one of the secretaries of the House departments, so that has not happened. 10-year non-renewable term means exactly what it says, so you get 10 years, and on the day that the 10 years expires, you're out the door. There's no possibility of renewal. There's a theory that the reason why they put that into the bill was that the then Clerk of the Senate was a very, very difficult sort of customer, and they wanted some way to ensure that eventually he would go. He wouldn't sort of stay on forever and ever. So that there's some suggestion that the 10 years was put in to make sure that eventually he went, but I don't know whether that's true or not. But 10 years means 10 years. There's no possibility of renewal. For the Parliamentary Budget Officer and the Head of Parliamentary Services, they have a 5-year term which is renewable for another 5 years. So eventually they could get 10 years, but it's 5 plus 5, not just 10. So where did we go to from there? Succession planning, sure. I mean, that's not something that's done formally, but it's certainly something that's done informally. You know, you're really looking for, amongst the more senior staff that are coming through, to think, you know, who is the future clerk of the House, who has the capabilities and skills and temperament and all those sorts of things to be the clerk of the House. And, you know, you would think about specific ways in which that person or those people could be developed so that you were in a position to feel confident that they could take on the role at some stage in the future. So not a formal process, you don't sort of pick winners, but definitely an informal process was happening in relation to that. And I think there was another question, was there?
Post-service benefit.
Oh yes, yeah. So that was in one of the slides that I really didn't cover because we'll cover it tomorrow with the staff. So in Australia, the post-service benefits for parliamentary service staff are exactly the same as those for public service staff. There are Acts of Parliament for the various schemes that are around, and they've changed the schemes over the years. But that legislation applies to all what they call Commonwealth employees. So a parliamentary service officer is a Commonwealth employee, as is a public service officer. So, for example, when I retired, I got the same pension arrangements as a senior public servant of equivalent level, equivalent experience and years of service would have obtained. So my pension was no different to what any ordinary public servant would have received, and the same applies to all staff.
I just want to ask you about the political questions, because I think because Malaysia have experience whereby we repeal our Parliamentary Service Act 1992 because of the tension between the Speaker of Dewan Raya and the Clerk of Dewan Raya itself. So I want to know your experience dealing with how the situation in Australian Parliament, especially House of Representatives, whereby if you have any experience dealing with hard speaker or is kind of very firm speaker, and the tension, how you resolve that tension, political tension between your side as a clerk of the house and the speaker of the house. I think because I want to make sure that if one day Malaysian Parliament using this Parliamentary Service Act again for the future itself, that thing will not happen again. So how does actually, can you share your experience about it as well?
Well, I suppose the first thing to say is, you know, of course there's going to be tensions in those relationships, not inevitably. I mean, I had good relations with the three speakers that I worked with, but some of those relationships were better than others. I suppose I felt it was my responsibility to get on with the Speaker. It wasn't the Speaker's responsibility to get on with me. So I went out of my way to make sure that I had a good relationship with whoever was in that position. And, you know, I still have a relationship with all the previous speakers who've now left the Parliament. I still have a good relationship with all of them. They call me periodically and we have a chat. So, but yeah, I thought that was my responsibility to make sure that there was a good relationship. Is that a solution to all problems? I don't know, but it was my attempt to sort of deal with that situation. So yeah, I mean, things could get difficult and tense. Many times I strongly disagreed with what the Speaker was doing, and at times speakers didn't take my advice, and sometimes they suffered for it, or mostly they suffered for it, but sometimes they didn't. But you know, I was there to provide advice. I'm not a decision maker, and the same with the House. I'm there to provide advice, but I don't make the decisions. So working at those relationships is the key. I don't see any reason why, you know, you should have a bad relationship with anybody in that position. It's a professional dealing with the person, and you should be able to keep it at that professional level. But a good question, yep. Have we exhausted everybody?
Hi, Mr. David. Actually, it's more similar, like a political or not the process issues, not technical issues. It's not more like politicals. Closely related to what Ryan raised on. Actually, it's in Malaysia, I think we are not lack of any idea or which is the area to be reformed, but sometimes we might need to be enlightened, like how the political movement to push this reform go through and get acceptance through the Parliament and the Legislative Assembly. For examples, like not necessarily every good inventions are inherited through Westminster traditions. For example, giving public subsidy to the MP research staff, it's actually get institutionalized through 1984 in Australia. So could you share with us what is the political context, or what is the movement to push from informal setup for parliamentary staff, or not MP personal staff, to a state public funding staff, which means that, and closely related to a to this issue is the second question. We always encounter one question is like how much money we need to pay or we need to invest in a parliamentary democracies. Like when we talk about we want to fund the MP or you want to fund the political parties, the society or some of the government MP will have reactions that why we should pay this money. Why we should invest on them instead of invest on roads, invest on, or the second question follow up with how much money we should pay for effective parliaments. So could you have a sharing on these topics? Yeah,
Right.
thank you very much.
I'm not sure I quite got the first question. I mean, expenditure on Parliament always attracts attention because people think, you know, some people think Parliament is a useless institution and shouldn't have any money at all spent on it. So, you know, that's something that the key people who are involved in Parliament need to try and defend and explain why it is that, you know, Parliament needs to be properly resourced and what value that provides to their community and to their democracy. So I think that's always a challenge for politicians, and if they're allocating, if they're just making decisions about more money to go to Parliament, then, you know, they need to be able to explain why that sort of thing is necessary. Just trying to pick up on other aspects of your question. How much? Right. Well, how long is a piece of string, I suppose? I mean, that's a very difficult question to answer. I think, you know, I suppose the only answer I'd give is, you know, that if you are going to allocate more or do it in a different way, then you need to explain that to people because, you know, as Hardy said, it is the taxpayers' money that's paying for the Parliament, and that does need to be properly explained and properly accounted for.
If there is no question, we can, I mean, go to the closing remarks. I think.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. There is another question. I think last question.
Oh, for Hardy. Oh, there we are. Good.
Actually, the program is for David Elder. Actually. Thank you. Actually, the report had been published in 2021. Early, yeah, 2021. Yeah, I'm sorry, Farah is executive in the research or unit at Reform. So we published in 2021. So we do a comparative study with 5 countries: Australia, UK, Canada, New Zealand, and India. So then actually we already sent our research report to all the stakeholders, including the Speaker's Office during that period of time is Tan Sri Azhar Azizan Harun, and also the President of Dewan Negara during that time, Tan Sri Dr. Rais Yatib, and also Ministers of Law, which is the current President of the Senate, and also the Secretary of Dewan Rakyat Dewan Negara. But unfortunately, we did not receive any call for them to present our research report. So then, because this report funded by Bersih too, so we publish as a book chapter, and then you can also see the research report in the website of Bersih. So yeah, so we are in the current situations. We are most welcome to the British High Com right now. I mean, continue the project. I mean, bringing David Elder, and also we are going to continue engage with members of Parliament, including government, backbenchers, opposition, independent, in order to make sure that the Parliamentary Service Act being revived. Yeah. So we have been told that the Parliamentary Service Act going to be tabled last month on October and then November. So there are a lot of rumors. Then the latest that we receive information that it will be tabled during the first meeting next year. So that's the reason why we are keep engaging with the MPs from different government benches and oppositions and independents. I think I answer your question. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So thank you very much to all participants for your various questions. Point of views in order to enlighten us, and also thank you to David Elder for your knowledge sharing and experience sharing. In order to conclude this session, I would like to invite Mr. Khairul Arifin Munir, Senior Manager at the Research Unit, Institute of Darul Ihsan. But at the same time, I would like to welcome Mr. Muhammad Amin, Secretary of State Legislative Assembly of Negeri Sembilan, who take time to come here and then to join us today. Thank you.
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and very good morning. Oh, we need to afternoon, sorry. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. David, and then we have here also Mr. David, and then we have here also Mr. Tom, yeah, from the Political Counsellor for British High Com, and then okay, and then the reforms. For organizing together with us program today, and thank you for those who are coming. I think we have here Mr. Vis, yeah, only put it Vis from Dewan Kita, and then Mr. Fakhrul Razi, yeah, from Merdeka Center, Mr. Ahmad Salami from Bersih. Kemudian we have here Mr. Nathan from Brickfield Asia College. Mr. Nathan, thank you. And then Muhammad Nur Shazwan from Ideas, Mr. Alif Fahmi from Team Selangor, Mr. Izzat from Merdeka Center, and then Mr. Zainul from Wadah Selangor. We have Mr. Fazril also from ABIM, Mr. Tanzrin from CSO Platform for Reform, okay. Wong Chang Zi, from SDSN Asia. Yeah, thank you for coming. And then Mr. Muhammad Amin lah, yeah. Terima kasih banyak hadir. Actually, we have a collaboration before with the late speaker, Datuk Zul. We handling a workshop for the State Assembly researcher, last 3 years ago. And then we have Mr. Muhammad Amin, and then Mr. Anas, Anas Hasbullah from Ikram, okay, Muhammad Husni from BHU JPM, Hailey Cheng, MP Subang Office, Ryan also, okay. Send our regard to Mr. Wong Cheng, and then Lena Henry from NDI. Is it okay? So on behalf of Institute Darul Ihsan, we would like to thank all of you for coming today. Actually, as for IDE, we are indeed would like to collaborate in terms of research, because we would like to promote a research-based concept of research-based society, on which we like to promote for all the stakeholders, or especially from the government side, and then the MPs, to invest in research, and in 2019 we have collaborated with Parliament Speaker Office, organising workshop for parliamentarian researcher, and the objective of the workshop was to promote and educate and enlighten the MPs for them to hire specific officer for as a researcher, so that it will be to help the parliamentarian in policy making process. So we try to promote that, because some of the our parliamentarian or adons, they tend to hire to spend some of their resource, hire officer as a jack of all trade. So what it means that the officer is a PA, he's a researcher, he do all the things, include try to cater the interests at the parliamentarian level. So I think indeed Brother Hadi, who are previously as a researcher in Parliament, I think who now in reform, had noble intents in it to promote, to advocate, for all the parliamentarians, and then to have something which is tangible, something which is concrete in terms of a researcher in Parliament. I think it's in terms of our challenge today, our post-normal time challenge today, our future, we need to have research as a base, in our policy making, in before we going to have any discussion on strategy or any solution want to be made. So on behalf of Institute Darul Ihsan, we would like to extend our sincere gratitude to all of you to come today, and inshallah in future we tend to continue our program, especially in workshops, research workshop for the parliamentarian. We want to promote that, and then we will have collaboration with Reform, Surah Hadi, for that, because such as what based on the question I proposed to you, that we need to have some kind of professional certificate, or we can need to have some sort of professional course, to those who are involved in the policy maker, especially at the parliamentary level and then our state assembly level, because they actually impact the livelihood of the people. So the policy, the law that they've been passed need to be thoroughly looked, that it is suit to the need of the people and to suit the need of the future of the country. Thanks for that. And then I would like to thank again to Mr. David for have opportunity to come here, and then we would like much more to have a collaboration maybe in the future in terms of training, in terms of talk, and then in terms of sharing your experience to our youngs, young blood such as Brother Hadi, who are promoting, advocate, I think about research as a prime institution for the parliamentarian and then for the state assembly. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Mr. Khairul Arifin, for his speech. Now I would like to invite Mr. Khairul Arifin to give some token of appreciations to David Elder.
We have books.
Oh, more books for me to take. You realise I'm going to travel back to Australia?
Yeah.
I love books, but...
So we have a script for Better Malaysia by our Prime Minister.
You
need to post it.
Okay. We also would like to invite Mr. Tom Shepherd from British High Court Commission to receive a small token of appreciation from Mr. Khairul Arifin. Yeah. Okay, we would like to invite all of us, everyone, to take a photo together. Duduk ke? Naik atas. Enggak.